Welcome to Stories from the Center of the Universe, the podcast about the human experience.
Hamill Jones, welcome to the Center of the Universe.
Thanks, Paul. Good to be here.
You and I share St. Christopher's in common. We share the love of basketball. We're going to talk in some depth about what I would argue is the biggest victory in the history of St. Christopher's, not just basketball, but in sports. So let's lay it out at the top. You in the last, it's been about a month or
It's
so?
been about a month, yes.
Yeah, what happened about a month ago at St. Christopher's against the top opponent?
So we played John Marshall, who is the premier program in Richmond and arguably Virginia and nationally known. And I have to actually go back a year ago. We played at their place. The game came up. An opportunity to play came up pretty late in the year.
First time y'all had played them?
We have played them before, but it had been a number of years.
Okay.
And they've always been good, but we had not played them when they were at their current level.
Right.
And a year ago, we had a chance to go play them late in the year, and we jumped at the opportunity. We got beat pretty handily, lost by 42.
You remember exactly how many points
Remember
you
the
lost
score,
by.
100 to 58.
Wow.
But our guys battled and competed, and there were segments where we showed we can play with these guys.
And when you say these guys, they're taller. I'm guessing are on average more athletic.
They have great size, skill, well coached, just an excellent program. But we had glimpses in that game a year ago that showed we could play with them. And they then go back maybe 5 weeks ago, they lost a game. A team they were going to play could no longer play. We had an open date on the schedule.
Oh, this is like you guys taking a fight on like 2 days' notice.
Both teams.
Both
teams.
both.
So we were the game ended up being played on a Friday night. Coach White and I were texting on Wednesday night about whether or not we could make it happen and what gym might be available, and we agreed that we could play on Wednesday night. And credit to Coach White and John Marshall for being willing to come to our place and take a road game. That's something in college basketball.
You'd never do.
Teams are always looking about whether or not it's going to be a home game or an away game, and that's one reason you don't often see Power 5 teams going to that really tough mid-major road game.
Yeah.
And so credit to them for being willing to come play at our place, which is very tight confines. We have a great
loud.
crowd, very loud. It's a great atmosphere to play in, but it can be tough for the opposition. And we got down 9-0. Wasn't looking good. I tried to keep glimpses of last year out of my mind. And then of all things, our big guy, Darius Gray, hit a three.
Does he normally take threes?
No, he does not normally take threes. And he's an excellent player, but he's an inside guy. But late in the shot clock, he took a three and he hit it, and that took the lid off the basket. And then our guys just made plays. Brandon Jennings, who's going to VCU, was incredible, just all over the floor, impacting the game in so many ways. Stu Cosby had 5 threes. Our other guys, Kellen Welch and Sonny Bridges, they battled defensively, and we pulled out a 53-50 win. So it's pretty exciting.
Not that you want to give away any of your coaching secrets, but was there a particular strategy at play at a high level that you can talk about?
The big thing, first and foremost, aside from strategy, was belief. So we talked about last year's game, and we got down 17-2. But then we talked about the next stretch of that game where we outplayed them, for 10 minutes or so, and won that 10-minute segment. And we got down 17-2 a year ago. We didn't handle their full court pressure well, and credit to them. But we had played the night before. It was our senior night. Having a game the day before you play John Marshall is not a good recipe for success.
Right.
So we went into our Thursday practice this year and said, this is different. We have an opportunity to practice, so we need to be really good on the practice floor today to be ready to handle their full court pressure. if we take care of that, we won't be down 17-2. Now, it only ended up being 9-0, so that was better than 17-2. But I think the guys believed. And then from a scheme standpoint, we really worked on guarding their post players so that they would have to work. We wanted them to take jump shots or have to shoot instead of slam dunks. Maybe they're making a post move from 6 to 8 feet away.
Right.
So we had that practice time, and I think the guys believed, and then they just played their hearts out. And I definitely think our crowd played a role in it too. They were electric.
I mean, it's probably the biggest visiting team to ever come to that gym.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was. So I've had the good fortune to be around St. Chris basketball for a long time. I went to St. Chris as a kid. I used to go to every home game. I would sit behind the bench. I always wore shorts too, no matter what the weather was like, because I wanted to shoot on the court after the game,
right.
And I didn't want to be wearing my school pants. So I went in my gym clothes to be ready to play as soon as the game ended. And then as a player and now 15 years as a coach, I've been fortunate to see a lot of games at St. Chris. And what struck me was how crowded the gym was 45 minutes before tip-off. There wasn't a JV game. So normally have a JV game beforehand. And, I mean, people came early and they were just sitting there watching warm-ups in a packed gym.
Were they there because they were super excited to see what was going to happen?
They were excited. Obviously, John Marshall's a big draw, but we've got a really good team. And then when you have a player like Brandon Jennings, one of the top players in the city, I think he is the top player in the city, VCU commit, they knew it was going to be an exciting matchup. So basketball fans were intrigued. St. Chris fans were intrigued. I know we saw some black and gold Ram fans in the crowd. Coach Odom was there.
Oh, nice.
And it was pretty neat. His father, Dave, the longtime Wake Forest and
assistant at
UVA, Wake Forest, South Carolina coach, he was there. So it was
he came too.
He came to the game as well.
Dave was in the house. Remind me to tell you a funny story after this recording.
Yeah,
about
it was fun. I'd never met him before, but I got to chat with him, and both of the Odoms were, I mean, they couldn't be nicer.
Yeah.
So it was great to see them.
And you could tell that the younger Odom is cut from the same cloth as Dad.
Yes.
Yeah.
Both very nice, but you can see that there's that
intensity.
burning intensity there as well, in a good way.
Yeah, no doubt. And so you mentioned y'all lost by 42 the prior season. I think they were crowned by, I don't know who crowns national champions at the high school level, but they were crowned by somebody to be the national championship from last year.
Yes, I mean, and they were, they were phenomenal. Now there were two players that were on last year's team for John Marshall that are now making major contributions at NC State and Vanderbilt. But they also have some new talented guys on their team as well as some of the familiar faces from last year.
Who were the kids that lost by 42 that then were part of that victory? Brandon sounds like he's one of them.
So Brandon was one of them. In terms of getting major time on the floor, it would have been Brandon, Darius, and Sonny Bridges, another starting guard. Stuart Cosby would have played some in that game. Kellen Welch was on the team, but he didn't play much. But in the 42-point loss, Brandon had a really big-time slam dunk in transition over one of their top players, and that injected the impact of that play. I think we felt this year.
Wow.
When you're playing a really good team and you see their talent, and hey, we got a guy on our team that can dunk over that guy.
Yeah.
Like, he might do that again tonight. That knowing you have that guy in Brandon on your team, I think gave everybody confidence.
I mean, I've never seen Brandon play. I saw some highlights from the John Marshall game. I mean, obviously, if he's a commit to VCU, he's a very talented player because VCU's always had a really good basketball program.
He is, and he impacts the game in so many ways. His feel is really high. He just does natural basketball things without being coached. And that, he's been well coached and he trains really hard, but he's just he'll make the right play at the right time. He'll throw the pass when it needs to be thrown, right on the money. He knows when it's time to go get a basket. He rebounds really well. He's a great ball handler. So he's just a calming, steady presence on the floor.
And everybody makes mistakes. So I imagine for him, when he does make a mistake, it's like, what just happened? That very, very rarely happens.
Yeah, he doesn't make very many mental mistakes. Everybody misses a shot, and I guess that could be classified as a mistake, but that's just part of the game. But his feel is really, really high level. And that's why I think he's going to be a big contributor next year to VCU, because some guys, when they come out of high school, maybe all they do is score, and that's what they're focused on. And then you get to college, and they already have guys that can score.
Right.
And if you want to get on the floor, you've got to be able to defend or be a great passer, do something in addition to scoring, because not many college coaches are going to say, we're going to run our offense through a freshman.
Right.
So Brandon can score, but he'll be able to impact the game in a wide range of ways, and that's why I think VCU is getting a really special player.
I mean, back in the day, they didn't allow freshmen to play.
Right. Yeah.
Like literally no one.
Right.
Like the best freshman in the country didn't get to play varsity.
And it's even harder now with NIL because college basketball is getting older. Players that might have been incentivized to,
those borderline guys are staying.
or to go play professional, whether it's in the NBA or overseas and get a paycheck, they can stay in college and get NIL money.
Yeah.
Or programs will get transfers that come from maybe a Power 5 but want more playing time. And so college basketball across the board is getting older and I think bigger and stronger.
That's great.
It's great for the college game in some ways, but it's harder for those high school recruits that are coming in as freshmen.
Yeah, I remember when everybody did 4 years at the same school. There was none of this transfer portal nonsense, and I'm old enough to call it nonsense. NIL wasn't a thing. And then Kentucky, quickly followed by Duke, and I know you're a Duke fan. I'm not, just to put that out there. They were great recruiters. I mean, and they had a brand name that was impossible to beat, and they brought in 3 to 7 one-and-done kids every year. Kentucky especially for the longest time. But Duke's been doing it for a while, too. Zion Williamson being his class being the most recent, obvious example. But it's been true since Zion, and it was true probably 4 or 5 years before Zion. Anyway, you brought up NIL. You're a high school coach, but what do you think the impact of NIL has been on colleges?
Well, it's been exciting to see older players making an impact. And you mentioned I'm a Duke fan. I'm still recovering from the big win that North Carolina had the other night.
UNC still recovering too, given their game last night.
But without NIL, I mean, I think there's a really good chance that Armando Bacot is playing professionally somewhere right now, if not last year or the year before.
Right.
But now it's a great opportunity for him to play at a wonderful university and a wonderful basketball program. Continuing with his education and at the same time be able to make some money.
Yeah.
So college basketball has gotten older, and that can be fun as a fan because you can see, as you mentioned Duke, I did miss watching the progression of a lot of players from freshman to sophomore, junior, senior year, seeing how they grow and matured.
Yeah.
And NIL has helped keep guys around a little bit longer. But it's also, and one thing that is harder is for freshman recruits, because a lot of colleges are going to want to go after the guy in the portal.
Right.
They'll get a seasoned 20, 21, 22-year-old rather than a 18 or 19-year-old who, if things don't go exactly how they want, could potentially be a risk to transfer.
And so a team may be looking at 4 or 5 freshmen, and now they're maybe looking at 2 or 3.
Yeah, they'll go with their top 2 or 3 in the fall, who they think maybe can impact the game right away, and then keep a couple spots in reserve for the spring to see what's available in the portal. Whereas in the past, I think a lot of schools might have said, we're going to get 4 or 5 freshmen. Here are 2 or 3 that we think are going to play next year, but here are 2 or 3 that we're going to get in the weight room or redshirt and develop. And so the recruiting landscape has changed. And that's why for a guy like Brandon, the fact that the recruitment that he had, I think, really speaks to the kind of player he is, because he had a number of great opportunities. And, are schools that he's going to have to work, but believe that he can be impactful early.
So NIL, in your estimation, is generally a good thing?
I think generally it's a good thing, but and again, I'm not an expert, it seems like there needs to be some legislation or
because it's kind of the Wild West,
govern.
right?
It's the Wild West. I mean, Rick Pitino recently just said there should at least be a salary cap, because now it's like there's no salary cap and it's constant free agency.
Yeah.
And
it's like pro sports.
Yeah, it's like pro sports, but without the
real money,
and the real money, and also the contractual obligation, so to speak. In that, I think coaches, Gino Auriemma, the famous, wonderful UConn women's basketball coach, talked about how hard it is to coach a kid now in this era because they can leave so easily, and it can take a special kid that wants to be coached hard, that wants to go through the bumps in the road that all college athletes experience.
Yeah, you get pressure at college one, just go to college two.
Yeah, exactly.
Or you're not getting enough playing time at college one to go to college two. And some kids, and I think you just need a waiver to do this, you could, over 4 years, play at 4 different institutions.
Yeah, I think, right now, another VCU guy, wonderful young man, Joe Bamisil, and I'm glad he's playing for VCU and has ended up home and in a great spot, and that fortunately he's now able to play because the NCAA wasn't allowing him to play at the beginning of the year for some reason. But Joe he played at Virginia Tech and George Washington, Oklahoma, and VCU.
In 4 years.
I believe so,
yeah.
Yes. And COVID had things to do with that and family circumstances. I'm really happy for Joe that he ended up back home and doing well. But trying to help players and coaches have the opportunity to be where they want to be, but also at the same time allow for relationships between coaches and players to develop, and I think for college athletes to go through an experience where they're able to unpack their bags for a little while and lay down some roots can be a good thing.
I mean, I'm biased because that's how I watched kids go through college for the longest time. Those roots are pretty powerful, but I get it. Like if something not great is happening at college one,
right.
maybe college two, and that is not all bad. That can be really good for the kid in some cases. And
I'm glad for the players too, that they can make some money. I was worried about, so I think back, I was very fortunate as a mediocre college player in Division III back in the day, but I played about 2 hours away from Richmond, and my parents could drive to my games and could go to basically every game. And I've always wondered about, what if there's a young man who goes to a college far from home, so his parents can't get to every game or get there regularly, and there's an expense involved. Who pays for that? The poor parents, unfortunately, can't go see their son or daughter play, and that doesn't seem right. So I'm happy that with NIL, kids can make some money so that they can do things like that if their parents want to come see them play. They've got some dollars in their pocket to help with that.
No, it's still a meritocracy, so the best of the best are making the most money. It's America, it's capitalism, it's all that. But it's certainly opening doors for more kids and their families than it would have otherwise. All right, you mentioned Baycott, and I think back to the John Marshall game. There was a 6'9", there's a 6'9" kid on that team. There's a 6'7" kid on that team. Darius is your tallest kid.
Darius, he's 6'4", 285. We've got 2 guys that are taller than him, but they're not 6'85". Yeah. Maybe 185.
Yeah.
So
285 and 6'4" is a pretty powerful combination.
Right.
But still, going up against that kind of height is hard for me to fathom as a guy who played at the same school in the 80s. We weren't going against guys that big. And I know that Armando Bacot played at Trinity Episcopal, and you coached for 15 years, so you coached against him. I mean, how do you deal with a guy that big? I mean,
Well,
he dwarfed everybody else on the court. He had to have.
Yes, he did. And from a scheme standpoint, we didn't want to let John Marshall just have a direct pass into the post. So we wanted to do what we call three-quartering, which is kind of a coaching point we talk to our guys about. You need to be able to breathe into their big man's ear. And then you need to have, so your chest is right up basically on his shoulder, so you could breathe in his ear. And then you have your other hand at an angle up in front of his face so that a passer sees a defender draped on top of him. If they lob it over the top, we need to have our guards and weak side help so that they can come and sandwich them.
Triple team
them. I mean, there were times from a basketball standpoint, I used to watch clips of how teams would guard Ralph Sampson back in the day. And sometimes he would have three guys around him, one in the front, one in the back, one on the side.
Yeah.
And that was our key. And also the ball's got to bounce the right way a time or two, and fortunately it did.
So y'all beat Trinity when Bacot was there?
I was thinking, no, we did not. We beat him. We beat him when he was a freshman. But in my time, I have never seen a player go from freshman to sophomore year and be such a drastically different guy.
Physically or skill wise, or both?
Both. When he was in the game as a freshman, compared to the other guys they had at the time, it was a good thing.
Yeah.
He just he was younger and maybe not as big and a little slower, but he was just dominant as a sophomore. And credit to him for the work that he put in. But it was I remember our guys he was so good getting rebounds and finishing and good touch around the basket. I'm not surprised he's had the great career that he's had. But between coaching against him at Trinity and then being a Duke fan, like, he has been in my basketball nightmares for a decade, and I'm ready for him. I don't have an NBA team. I'm ready for him to go on, have a great career, and I don't have to worry about him anymore.
Yeah, because he's very, very good. I mean, I would argue maybe for the last 2, maybe even 3 years, he's been the best big man in the country.
Yep. No, he is, and I think they win a national championship against Kansas if he doesn't roll his ankle.
Right.
Because they were up and he just hurt himself, and you hate for a guy to get hurt, and especially in that moment. And Kansas was able to make a run. I was actually at that game, but my seats were up at the top of the Superdome, so I can't say I actually could see everything that was going on.
Could you see the ball at least?
If I put my my pinky and my pointer finger together, I could put the court in between my fingers when I looked from my seat. So
finding the ball, you're going to have to make some educated guesses.
Exactly.
Where it is.
And actually, thinking back to the Superdome, not only my dad and I, when I was a kid, we were at the Carolina-Michigan Final Four in '93 when Chris Webber called the timeout.
Oh, you were at that game?
We were at that game, and pre-social media, cell phones, so we were, again, in the rafters, and I had zero idea what was going on. That was total chaos.
But you were
confusion. But I was there. Yep.
All right, we're going to jump all the way back. Where were you born and raised?
So I was born here in Richmond, lived here basically my whole life, and went to St. Chris for 13 years.
Yeah, I was talking to Tim McCoy. We can mention his name. He loves hearing his name on this podcast. Before you came over, and he said, oh, yeah, he's a true saint. And I knew what he meant. He was going to say K through 12. And I'm like, and I didn't say this to him, but am I not a true saint? I only did 8 through 12. What if you started in first grade? Does that make you a true saint? Anyway, Tim,
you're a true saint for sure. You are.
I'll take it. Yeah, I think anybody that goes there and contributes in some way to the school is absolutely a true saint. But it's just funny his phrasing. But anyway, but K through 12, and you grew up like not far at all from the campus.
Yeah, my dad. Folks are divorced, but both live within a mile of the campus, and my dad still lives right behind the football field. And when he bought that house, I'm convinced he did it for 2 reasons. One, it was right by school, And then it was essentially in between school and the Maple and Patterson Pizza Hut. So we had school covered and dinner.
He's a big pizza fan.
Yeah, and so that's actually been a sad loss for that neighborhood. The
It's not
Maple
there.
and Patterson Pizza Hut is no more.
Yeah.
I ate the buffet there.
It was
quite
there
a lot.
forever.
It was an institution.
Yeah, that part of town has changed some, but it hasn't changed that much, actually.
Yeah, no, there are a lot of traditional staples there, but it's growing up a little bit. The place to eat those, the Westwood Pharmacy.
Yeah, that's been there.
That's that happening spot.
It's been there since probably the 60s, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's been there for a while. Good place to walk through after the team wins, but after a tough loss, maybe not.
So what was it like going to St. Christopher's K through 8? What was that like?
So I loved it. Still close with my buddies. That's one of the special things about going to school there for a long time. You develop great relationships with your friends, and you know what they're about, and you've been through the ups and downs together. Then a special part of the experience for me, I was around campus all the time. I mentioned I went to the basketball games. I was a ball boy for the football team when I was in 5th grade. There were so many teachers and coaches that paid an interest in me when I needed it during some tough times, and I liked them. I liked what they were about. I liked the values that they embodied, and I remember thinking, this would be a wonderful profession if I were fortunate enough to be able to pursue it. And so I knew I wanted to become a teacher and coach, and then to be able to work with a number of those teachers and coaches as colleagues has been pretty special too.
Yeah, it just hit me. I was in the middle school for a year, and certainly upper school for 4. Every single teacher shared this notion of a great value system, which meant they were decent people, and I say that in the most positive, most powerful way possible. They were there to support and care for kids when they needed it. They were there to challenge them when they needed it, but it was always coming from this place of decency and care. And yeah, I do not regret 1 minute of being there, other than I wish there were more classes with young ladies. Right. Outside of that.
There were times where now they have a lot of co-ed classes in high school, and I think that's good for making sure that the boys, when they go off to college, they're going to be in classes with women, and professionally they're going to be working with women, working for women.
Right.
It's really good for them to experience that co-ed nature.
Absolutely.
Of the academic setting. But I think when they're younger, boys and girls oftentimes learn different and develop at different rates and times.
Oh, girls are way ahead of boys.
And yeah,
age.
girls can be a lot more mature, and so it can be good to have that for certain kids, that single-sex educational setting, and then when they get older, we'll get them ready to go off into the real world.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you mentioned the teachers and the coaches. I can remember. Did you ever have Carl Koenig?
Absolutely. He was my coach my junior year basketball. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So he's in the Randolph-Macon Basketball Hall of Fame,
As he should be.
Played for Paul Webb, and I remember at one point he knew I loved basketball. I don't think I'd even was maybe in his history class at the time, but hadn't played for him. But he gave me a copy of the book A Sense of Where You Are by John McPhee, and it's about the great New York Knick and Princeton basketball player Bill Bradley, and just how he became a great player and on and off the court. And I've always remembered that because, one, Coach Koenig didn't have to share that book with me.
Could have easily walked away.
And also it was a connection through basketball, but also by giving me a book, it demonstrated, the intellectual side of Coach Koenig. So there were so many teachers and coaches where you could see they were passionate about their subject, but also loved their sport too. And that made an impression.
And they were always mindful of how can I help these kids that are in my charge kind of thing.
Did you ever have to? Coach Koenig, he called when I played for him. He called his sprinting series that would get you in shape from a conditioning standpoint.
Before the season or during?
before the season, and then if we misbehaved or didn't do what we were supposed to, it certainly happened during the season. But he called his sprints shuffles. And it seemed to imply that that might be enjoyable. And Coach Koenig's shuffles were not fun.
No, they were not. Yeah, I was the bridge from Koenig to Kemper, or Carl and Dick, my junior senior year, and I just called them suicides. And I'm sure this still happens today. Maybe you employ this in practice. Like, we're all going to shoot free throws, and if you miss one across, 12, 15 kids, you could be running 15 suicides that day.
You could be on the line for sure.
And if you're the 12th kid, you're exhausted shooting that free throw.
There was Coach Koenig definitely had us in shape. That's for sure.
Yeah, I don't think I had the shuffles. I never experienced that. Maybe he hadn't incorporated that into his program yet, or because I was playing football, I didn't have to go through that. But yeah.
So we were in the 8th grade teams at St. Chris, and I should know this, and I don't, but the 8th grade sports teams are called the Bulldogs.
Yeah.
So we're the St. Christopher Saints, but you talk about Bulldog basketball, everybody at St. Chris knows that's 8th grade basketball. Bulldog football, 8th grade football. Coach Koenig called his sprints Bulldog shuffles.
So I guess he went from varsity to Bulldog?
He did.
Okay. Yeah.
And he's a great coach, and he retired in the early 2000s, I think, and moved to Bedford and volunteered to coach with some of the basketball teams in Bedford, Virginia. And he and I would correspond, and he was just as sharp as ever and studying the game even after he retired. And that was something I also took from him, just never thinking you've got all the answers. And this is a guy that he's forgotten more basketball than I'll probably ever know, and he was still looking to learn. And so that was something, the lifelong learning aspect I really took from him.
It's a great lesson. Yeah, Carl, when he was coaching you in 8th grade, was probably the best 8th grade basketball coach, maybe in the Mid-Atlantic region.
Yes, he was. And he was competitive too. And he was funny. He would, if he disagreed with a call with the official, because you don't get as many fans at an 8th grade game as maybe
parents
as you do as you do at a varsity game. So he would work the officials, but he was maybe tamer than he would have been at a varsity game. So if he didn't like a call, instead of saying, you blew it, how could you make that call, he would say, surely you jest, to the official.
And he got his point across.
Yeah, he got his point across.
All right, so you weren't just a basketball guy, though. Did you play other sports?
So I played football, and then also played baseball. And football was kind of, I guess, 8th grade, broke my thumb. 9th grade, broke my ankle. Junior year, tore my ACL.
Man.
So I visited the doctor a lot. But I loved competing. I loved being on a team. I really enjoyed being a multi-sport athlete. I think that's something that, in today's world, I get it. There are times you need to specialize, but there's a lot of value from playing a lot of different sports too. Having a different role on a team. Maybe you're a role player on one team, but a star on the other.
Right.
And therefore, you know what it's like to be in both situations on a team, and then also different coaching styles. Talked about Coach Koenig. I learned a ton from my basketball coaches like him, and a guy named Tom Franz was my varsity coach. He was a wonderful player at Davidson College, and then Kerry Mock and Rich Udapole for basketball, but then Coach Kemper for football, Tony Simondera for baseball. You can pick up so much from being around different coaches, and then
think about how lucky you were to have those guys.
Oh, it was great. Yeah, it was great, and very fortunate. And then you can take the things you like about each one of them and work them into your own style.
Yeah,
and that's been helpful.
So you played for Tony. Tony was an assistant coach when I went through, and he became the head coach the year after. So he's been there. He's an institution at St. Christopher's. When people think baseball, St. Christopher's, they certainly think Tony, but maybe even Richmond. He's probably one of the first 2 or 3 names that people think about for high school baseball in the area. How would you describe his approach to baseball, or just his coaching style in general? And I get that you still work with him. So
right. Yeah, no, it's One thing that a number of things I'll take away from watching Tony coach over the years. I'll start with perseverance, because he didn't always have great teams. And, I played for him and we weren't great. And you think about so many coaches, John Wooden, he wasn't John Wooden until relatively late in his career.
Right. He was probably in his 50s.
And Tony, there were some dry spells in terms of talent, and you coach each team to the best of your ability. And over time, he built St. Christopher's into an incredibly well-respected and successful baseball program. So that commitment and perseverance is something I took from him. I think he has also adapted and evolved over the years. He was very fiery when he was a younger coach, and you didn't want to make a mistake, and in terms of not being afraid to fail and make a play, but you knew that he could get on you, and you're mindful of that. But things have changed in terms of how you work with young people and what they're used to, and I think overall there have been a lot of positives. But maybe what some would consider hard coaching, you can't do it quite like you maybe could in the old days, and he's really adapted. So it's been interesting to see him take on. I know he's intense, but there are times where he can very much be in that more, I'll say, nurturing role, if that's the right way to describe it.
You can still be intense and still nurture.
Yeah, and the relationship piece, I think he's done a great job with. And then also the way he uses his assistant coaches, that's something that's really important. He's got a great staff, and he delegates, and he trusts them.
Yeah.
He's done a wonderful job.
No, I am proud to say that I knew him back in the day when he had just come to St. Christopher's, and to see what's happened over the last 37 years has been fun to watch.
I was laughing with my dad recently. I enjoyed playing baseball, but I wasn't a great baseball player. But I was tall and could catch and played first base. And my senior year, we played at Norfolk Academy, and my dad was telling me this the other day. So he drove down to the game, and maybe the first inning, as I remember it, there were 2 ground balls that were hit to our middle infielders. And maybe the throw was a little off, or I maybe didn't play the position quite properly. But the umpire on each of these 2 throws said my foot had come off the bag, and so he called the runner safe. And I was getting frustrated. So then there's a 3rd ground ball that's hit. And it was right to the second baseman, short throw. I was probably standing on first base with 2 feet, caught it.
Standing in the middle of the base.
Yeah, clearly out. And just out of frustration, and I shouldn't have done it, but I turned and looked at the umpire, and then I stomped first base.
Before the runner got there?
Before the runner got there. Yeah. So he's clearly out, and it was sort of like, did I get him out this time?
Right.
My frustration. Well, he tossed me.
Oh my goodness.
He said, "You're out of here." So then I went back to the dugout, and that's where the intense Tony let me know that my behavior was not appropriately representative of what he wanted from his baseball team, and he lit into me, as he should have. But then it was worse. I got it from my dad.
Because you knew that was coming.
Because he was like, not only did you look like a fool doing that, I drove 2 hours to Norfolk to watch you play baseball, and
you got
kicked out in the first inning. That's the only time I've ever been thrown out of a game.
That's 2.5 decades, roughly.
Yep.
Right? Not quite. And you still remember it.
Yep.
Like it was yesterday.
Very, very much.
When you say you only got kicked out of 1 game, were the other kids are being kicked out of more games than one in their careers?
We weren't getting kicked out very often. So.
I don't think back in the 80s we had the guts to do what you did.
Well, and it wasn't calculated. That was the thing. It was kind of spur of the moment frustration. I should have known better. The male brain still developing, and at the time,
you had 7 years to go at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny. You think Tony remembers that? I bet he does.
I think he does. When he was my boss as the head of the upper school when I was a history teacher.
Oh, yeah.
So when I was interviewing for jobs, I kind of hoped he had forgotten about it. He's probably seen a lot, but I think he let me know at some point he still remembered it.
That's a pretty memorable thing. I'm sure he hasn't had that many kids get kicked out of games.
That's right.
So
I don't think that my loss was that big of an impact on the team, though. So
as long as you had a good backup first
right.
baseman, I guess you're okay. So when you were a senior in high school, was it about going to a school that was great academically, or was it like, hey, I also want to play sports, and so it's this nice mix of being able to play basketball? Because I'm guessing that was your best sport.
Yeah. So I blew out my knee junior year playing football, so I missed my whole junior basketball season.
Oh, it's brutal.
So any chance of recruitment,
Because they're looking at juniors.
yeah, looking at juniors was out the window, and I'd had an okay sophomore year, but it wasn't anything to write home about. So I went into my senior year not really knowing what I was going to do and how my knee would hold up, and I played football and had a solid year, and then played basketball, and that went well. And I was actually planning to play football at Washington and Lee. In hindsight, a mistake I made was only applying to one Division III school, because that was the right level for me.
Right.
And fortunately, I got into WNL, and
Wait a minute, that's the only school you applied to, period, just Division
the only
III?
Division III school. Yeah, and fortunately, I got in, and by the time I was later my senior year, I knew I wanted to try to play a sport in college. And had I not gotten into WNL, I wouldn't have left myself with good options.
It would have been a lot harder.
It would have been a lot harder. I would have tried to walk on at whatever bigger school I went to. So now, one thing I'll tell kids if they want to play a college sport, and I'm coaching them and helping with the recruiting process, cast a wide net. Apply to your couple of your dream schools, but also make sure you have a number of schools that you're applying to where if you get in, you have a reasonable chance of making the team, so to speak.
Right.
But then ultimately, I liked basketball a little bit better and felt that it was more fun to train in the off season by playing basketball and working on basketball than football training.
So you're kind of a gym rat.
So I was a gym rat and wanted to play basketball. And also I'd had some concussions playing. I mentioned the injuries playing football. I felt like playing basketball might be healthier for me. And
Ankles as an exception.
yes, yeah, exactly. So ended up going to WNL and playing basketball there.
Yeah. And did you play a lot?
Not a ton my freshman year, and we weren't very good. We were 4-20. Now the ODAC, the Old Dominion Athletic Conference, was loaded. I mean, Mike Rhodes was the head coach at Randolph-Macon.
Macon's been good forever.
They've been good forever. Tony Shaver had Hampton-Sydney rolling. They were fresh off a national championship game appearance.
I didn't realize they'd made it that far.
Yeah, 99, I believe, they lost to Wisconsin-Platteville, who was coached by Bo Ryan, who went on to be the Wisconsin head coach.
He was there before he went to Wisconsin?
He was at Wisconsin-Platteville, who beat Hampton-Sydney in the national championship game. Bridgewater was really good. I mean, the ODAC was loaded. And so we weren't very good. We were 4-20. Two things I remember about that season. I was reading a book it was Pat Conroy. Have you read any Pat Conroy?
No.
The Lords of Discipline and The Great Santini. But he played basketball at the Citadel. So he wrote a memoir called My Losing Season. And actually, no, I'm getting my stories confused. He wrote a book called My Losing Season. At the end of my 4 years of WNL, we unfortunately never had a winning season. So I remember thinking, well, I could write a book called My 4 Losing Seasons.
Or My Losing College Career.
Yeah, exactly. And then, but the book was, there was a book called The Last Amateurs by John Feinstein, college basketball writer.
He's probably the best basketball writer of all time.
Yeah, he's great. And he wrote a book chronicling a season in the Patriot League, which at the time was non-scholarship. One of the guys he profiled was a walk-on the worst team in the Patriot League, and this guy did the math and said, well, if I'm the worst player on the only non-scholarship Division I team and my team's in last place, I'm probably the worst player in Division I basketball. Well, at the time, I wasn't playing much on a team that ended up going 4-20, and I remember thinking, geez, am I the worst guy in Division III? But I really worked, and ended up by the time, actually my sophomore year, I was proud of this. There were some things that happened, but I ended up being a captain as a sophomore.
Wow.
So I ended up being a 3-year captain at WNL.
That's pretty rare.
And I felt good about how I carried myself. I wasn't the best player, but I worked hard, and I tried to compete every day, have a good attitude, be team first. And I carved out a niche as a garbage player that would just set screens, hustle, take charges.
Oh, your teammates loved you.
Throw the ball to the guy that should be shooting, try to get him open.
Sure.
And that was kind of my niche. And even though we didn't win as much as we liked, it sometimes, it really tested me to be on a bad team and to try to just never give up. And, hey, tomorrow's a new day. We got Randolph-Macon tomorrow. They may have beaten us 10 times previously, but let's lace them up and go give them everything we got. And that was valuable. And I knew I wanted to coach, so being able to, my coaches, even though we weren't very good, I thought I played for great coaches who were wonderful men and really learned a lot.
You could argue that you learn more from those adversities than you do when you're winning all the time.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Well, and eventually, and look, life is full of wins and losses. There are good days and bad days. It's a lot easier to get through the bad days when you know that you've persevered for a long period of time prior to that.
Right. No, absolutely. And there were times that I remember thinking it was good to have an experience where I'm having to deal with something that's hard. Going to practice is hard. You have to do the work, and you have to make certain sacrifices, and then you're not winning. Like, you have to handle that the right way. That's hard. And I look back on it, I'm really glad. And that we were talking about NIL, and I can't speak to other people's circumstances, but I know for me there was great value in going through something that was hard over 4 years, even if it never went my way or the way I wanted or envisioned it going. There was value in that. And also always appreciated my coaches. They continued to coach me. I had a new one coach my first 3 years, and then a new coach my senior year. And there were times that senior year I was in his doghouse, but he kept coaching me, and I kept working. And so that was something I took away. And also I was in college. I was a sophomore when 9/11 happened, and remember where I was on campus on that horrible day. And there were men and women my age that were serving, and
there were kids quitting college to serve.
Yeah, and here I am being able to play college basketball at that time, and that's not hard compared to what so many of our brave men and women were doing at that time.
Yeah, everything's relative.
Yep.
Yeah. No, it's well said, and I appreciate that perspective. It's funny, you're a Duke fan. 9/11 happens, and might have been 2 days later, might have been a week later. I'll never forget, there was an interview of two kids that had just quit during the beginning of either their junior or senior years at Duke University. And for a guy like me, I was 10 years past college. I'm like, Duke kids are going to quit in the middle of their undergrad to go serve their country? This is the level of patriotism that represents is just mind-boggling to me. Because when you think about war, it's usually the folks that have fewer options, maybe socioeconomically are not as well off. But two Duke kids,
right,
quitting school for a period of time and volunteering to join the military.
Incredible, Pat Tillman.
Oh my gosh,
leaving the NFL. So
if you ever think you have you're having a bad day or a bad week or a bad month, there are plenty of examples where people have it so much worse than you do.
And then being a history teacher, just being thankful that I get to teach and coach at a wonderful school and be around great kids, and there are people out there doing tremendous hard things so that people like me can do that.
Yeah.
It's incredible what others do for us so that we can, have these opportunities.
It's good to remember how fortunate we are, for sure. All right, so you mentioned 9/11 before we started recording. You had mentioned you taught a class on that. Could you say more about that class?
Yes, so I taught history for over a decade at St. Christopher's. World history courses, a lot of 20th century focus, but I taught a senior elective called 9/11 to Now. And
you developed the curriculum for it.
I developed it with our history department chair. He was the leader, so he was the pilot. Andy Smith, who you probably know real well.
He taught me 8th grade English and was my Bulldog basketball coach.
Yeah, so Andy Smith was our history department chairman, and he was the middle school principal when I was a student. So it was an example of working with him. But it was his brainchild, but I got to work with him in helping to develop it. And the course was a senior elective divided into, I'll say, 3 parts: studying the day itself. And when the course started, the students taking the class were in elementary school on 9/11. So they have vague memories of it. As the course ran its life, we were teaching students about 9/11 who did not live through it because they were too young or hadn't been born. The second part of the course was the 100-year period, the 20th century leading up to 9/11, and the third part of the course was the post-9/11 world. So the course was constantly evolving from one year to the next, based on what was happening in the world, and also based on what students brought to the class in terms of their own knowledge and memory.
Yeah.
And that was something I always liked about being a teacher and as a coach. You teach that class, it puts winning and losing a game into perspective again. And then also it's a reminder of ultimately what are we here to do as educators, whether it's on the court or in the classroom. We're teachers, and helping these young men be thoughtful, informed, contributing citizens.
Yeah, you're talking about juxtaposing playing a sport with what happened on 9/11. Obviously, much more serious event that happened on that day. Playing basketball, because you and I both played, you're striving, and that's the point. What you learn and how you develop from striving like that is important. If the backdrop is it's not the most important thing happening in the world, that's okay. You're working on yourself, and you are becoming better because you're putting yourself through a tough set of circumstances.
It's one of the things we really talk about at St. Chris now is the pursuit of excellence. Of course, we hope that the boys attain excellence, but you can't guarantee that.
Right.
But you can constantly pursue it and learn that that's ultimately what's most important. What is your process like? Are you working as hard as you can to position yourself for success?
So your effort is what matters a lot more than where you end up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's something we try to incorporate into our coaching as well.
Yeah, that's really cool. I have to ask, did you ever have Bob Blanton?
I did. And
in Latin?
No, not for Latin. I had him. I worked out in the weight room with him when I was a player, and our team will be lifting with Bob Blanton later today.
As they should be.
He's still there. More than 50 years at St. Chris.
Yeah, because Bob's in his 70s now, right?
Yes, and between him and Don Galladay,
who I saw him last year. I couldn't believe he's still there.
Two current faculty members who have been at St. Christopher's more than 50 years, and with last year Ron Smith retired. So we had 3 faculty members who had spent more than 50 years each at the school.
And Andy retired, a couple years ago?
And he retired. He wasn't, I don't think, quite at 50, but he was pretty close.
He was really close.
He wouldn't like me saying that he was that close to 50. But
I had Andy on this podcast.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
But that was fun.
Oh, absolutely. He's a very interesting guy.
He's helping me with a project that I'm working on. He's now the school archivist.
Oh, okay.
In his kind of a part-time gig, but what a great person to do that. But he's helping me do a research project on a former St. Chris basketball player.
You were telling me about this.
Yeah,
this is awesome.
Yeah, he graduated. Apparently, as a kid, he could not. His name was Jack Parr, and he could not. The proverbial couldn't walk and chew gum at the same time. Couldn't catch, but he actually could run. And during his time at St. Chris, he ended up growing, and it was maybe 6'8",
which is really tall.
Got a scholarship offer at the 11th hour to go out to Kansas State. And
it had to be, I think we said, for JUCO first and then Kansas State.
He did actually a PG year at St. Chris.
Oh, okay.
And then went out to Kansas State. And freshmen couldn't play their first year at that time.
But how does Kansas State find a PG kid in St. Christopher's?
So there, and this is where I think it gets really fascinating. They heard about Jack Parr through another recruit. Hey, there's this kid in Richmond you ought to take a look at. The coach at Kansas State, they were coming off an 11-10 season, and so they were desperate. And Kansas Jayhawks were a power, not far away. But this young coach at Kansas State was willing to look anywhere, and somebody told him about this kid out of Richmond who was tall and could run, and they needed a big guy apparently, and so he's off at Kansas State. Jack Parr ends up growing to 6'10". Before too long, he's jumping center for the Wildcats when they play Kansas, and their center was a guy named Wilt Chamberlain.
How crazy is that?
And the Wildcats during Jack Parr's time, went from being 11-10 to being a Final Four team.
Wow. And this is back in the 50s?
Mid-50s, yeah, 54 to 58. Well, the coach for Kansas State, the young coach, was Tex Winter. Tex Winter goes on to be probably the most famous NBA assistant coach of all time. Phil Jackson's right-hand man, designed the triangle offense, taught it to Phil Jackson, taught it to Michael Jordan, taught it to Kobe Bryant, and however many 9 NBA championships later.
Might have been 10.
I know Coach Phil Jackson ended up with 10 or 11. I think he ended up with 11. I don't know if Winter retired before the last two. But, Tex Winter had a huge impact on basketball. And so if you're a young coach and you're an 11-10, and you're not beating your rival, you very well may go from being a young coach to being a former coach.
Right.
And so this guy from St. Chris, Jack Parr, was part of a recruiting class that helped turn the tide for Kansas State. And who knows, maybe we don't hear Tex Winter in the triangle offense if they don't have success with Kansas State in the 50s. It's just been really neat.
Michael Jordan doesn't win 6 championships, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. You never know.
You never know.
Because Jordan, as good as he was, a lot of teams knew to just, in the playoffs, like the Detroit Pistons.
Just beat him up.
Just beat him up.
Yeah.
The other guys aren't going to be ready to make a play. Beat up Jordan. They might win a game, but they're not. He can't withstand it for a 7-game series.
Right.
But the triangle incorporated that team play while still letting Michael be Michael.
Oh, it's the most effective offense I've ever seen at the professional level, other than whatever San Antonio was doing when Duncan was there.
Right. So it was a fascinating story, and then it was also pretty neat. You know the name Petey Jacobs, a longtime coach at St. Chris, and interestingly enough, at Collegiate or rival. So at St. Chris,
that's not supposed to happen.
Yeah, there's Jacobs Field where Coach Simondera leads the Saints to all those baseball wins, and then there's Jacobs Gym at Collegiate.
Same guy.
So, and everybody loves him, at both schools. Yeah. So, but Petey Jacobs was Jack Parr's coach, and he saw something special in him and coached him up when he was just that gangly 10th grader.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool story.
Pretty neat. So I've had fun researching that.
The connection to Tex Winter, who obviously is connected to Jackson and Jordan, is huge. But Chamberlain was no pun intended, a giant of the game. Like, nobody had ever seen him. I heard a story of Chamberlain. He was playing with the Lakers he was there. He's 43 years old. And he had like 18 block shots or something crazy.
So the Kansas State folks were great. I reached out to them. Do you have any video footage of Jack Parr? So they sent me some clips of Jack Parr playing against Kansas. Maybe it was his sophomore year. No Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt Chamberlain was a year younger.
Right.
And it just looked like a normal 1950s game with normal guys. Then they also sent me the following year with Will Chamberlain. And it was incredible to turn that on and just see how physically dominant. He blocked the first shot from basically the top of the backboard. So we were talking about Armando earlier. I can only imagine what it must have been like to coach against Will Chamberlain the first time. He is so graceful and athletic, and
he couldn't shoot from 20 feet, but that's all he couldn't do.
Right. Yeah, so it was neat to go back and look at that footage as well. And Will Chamberlain, just looking at him, you know, as a sports fan, you always kind of wonder, all right, if we took Babe Ruth and put him in a major league game today, how would he do? That
the 25-year-old version of him.
Yeah, exactly. Wilt Chamberlain, he looks like one of those guys that, you know, you'd put him in the modern game today, and I know it's a different game with all the three-point shooting, but he'd probably find his way to be pretty successful.
I think he'd be a star, no question. Yeah, because he was how tall?
I think he was 7 feet.
Yeah, he was 7 feet. And graceful.
Yep.
And fast, and he could jump, and very coordinated. Yeah, he'd be just fine.
And but the St. Chris guy, Jack Parr, his go-to move is something you never see anymore, and it was a version of Kareem's sky hook.
Oh, nice.
Which that seems like such a difficult shot.
Especially when it's from 20 feet.
When it's from 20 feet, and it was funny to watch these tapes because guys are throwing in these
That's how most of them
crazy
shot
hook shots with regularity.
There was a lot of they didn't have the traditional jump shot that we think of today. Not most of them didn't seem to have that, but you watch more film than I have. So
when you played, well, I'm curious because you were playing at the advent of the 3-point line.
I graduated just before the 3-point line.
Okay, just before. I was
so angry when that came into being for Virginia high schools. To have a 3-point line at high school would have been amazing.
I was going to ask. I was wondering back when it first came into play, was taking a 3-point shot sort of the forbidden fruit, because now teams are shooting. I mean, last night we played and. We played St. Anne's Belfield, and they've got a really good team. They shot 32 threes, and we shot 25.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for us, they made a lot more than we did. It was one of those nights. But to 57 three-pointers, that's a lot of threes in one game.
That was not happening in 1988, 89 when it came in. And so I played with those guys that ended up winning the state championship the next year. The vibe that I picked up on was, if you shoot it, you better make it. Right. And if you don't make it, you're not going to be shooting that for a while. So maybe there were 3 or 4 in the game, and if you were the one who took all 4 of those, you better have made 2 of them.
You better make them.
Yeah. Because there was no concept. There was no history there. So we didn't know what was good. If you made 35 out of 100, it's pretty good.
Right.
But back then it probably didn't feel very good.
Now teams, they want layups or threes.
Yeah.
Because when you're a little kid, that's what you practice. Your layup or your three. You're not shooting the mid-range.
The mid-range 12-footer.
Yeah, so if you can get teams to shoot a lot of mid-ranges, the analytics are usually in your favor.
All right, so you're obviously a basketball coach, and I've talked to you about the sports podcast that I'm pondering doing. Love to have you back on that. But as a sports lover, I think I can speak for both of us, walk through what the rest of the season is going to look like.
So for St. Chris, all right, so we are sitting at 18-6 overall, 5-2 in the prep league. Both losses to St. Anne's Belfield out of Charlottesville, who's got an excellent team. They got us last night. It was a 1-point game in the fourth quarter, but they can get hot really quickly, and they had a barrage of threes that created the separation. But we've got tough games coming up. We'll travel to Trinity. I hope Armando is not there.
Just for inspiration.
Yeah. So, and that's always a tough game. And one of the things that's so much fun about high school basketball, the environments are great. And the thing about our league, if we're playing in Richmond, whether it's at Trinity or Collegiate, I mean, it's going to be a game where you've got student sections exchanging pleasantries
There's nothing
back
like
and forth. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And then you go on the road, it's, your back's against the wall because you've got your team and maybe the parents there, but then an opposing student section that's all over you. So, I mean, they're big-time atmospheres. So we'll play at Trinity on Friday, host VES on Saturday, and then next week we've got Fork Union and finish out with Collegiate at home to close down the regular season. Then the Prep League tournament, and then the state tournament is after that.
I have to ask you, do you roughly know what your record is against Collegiate?
I do not. I do know we've won more than we've lost.
Couldn't say that back when I was playing.
One of the things we've been fortunate over the years to, we've had some really good players. I mean, Nick Sherrod and played a great career at Richmond, and Alexander Petrie, and a guy named Rodney Williams who played at Drexel, and so it's a great rivalry. And I think a lot of times, the teams that, coaching is part of it, but teams that have better players a lot of times win.
They certainly have a leg up.
And that has been something that, when Collegiate had Russell Wilson playing quarterback, they were pretty good at football.
Yeah, it's hard to beat them.
And now Coach McFall at Collegiate, fantastic coach as well. But a lot of the players they're the ones that impact the game the most.
Yeah, well, they're out there certainly playing it. Coaches have a big part of that too. But I do have to ask you, because I met you a few days after you beat John Marshall, and all you could talk about was how you were worried about a letdown in the next game or two or three. The game ends at whatever time it ends. How many hours or days pass before you're like, I really have to help this team get back to ground level? And how did you do it?
It was fun, to have that type of experience. It was fun to see the guys so excited. To lose by 42 and then to
win.
Have the win. I mean, that was a neat moment. And so you want to enjoy it. I was actually not prepared for the reaction. And what I mean by that, we felt like we could win. In our locker room, we talked about it. We felt like we could win. We actually pulled up and printed out some bulletin boards from the VCU fan site of people that were planning to come to the game. And, they weren't saying anything bad, but they were coming to see Brandon, as they should, against good competition, which is true. None of them were expecting a win.
Yeah, of course.
They were expecting to see a blowout. We printed that out, shared that message with the guys before the game, and you could see, they were ready. And so we expected to play well. We knew we had a chance to win. And so when we won, we were excited, but I wouldn't say that we were shocked. It was that sense of, we just did something that we knew we could do, but we knew it was going to be really hard. And now we're enjoying it together. I think the shock was very much outside of our locker room. And it was really neat, though. I know I got more texts from people
your phone had to have blown
I've
up.
Ever connected with, and I hope I got back to all of them. But it was really special to think about the relationships that led to that. Former players, parents of former players, friends, and the enjoyment that they got from the win. That was neat. It showed what the St. Chris community is all about, and then also it made me think about, through basketball, the wonderful relationships that I've been fortunate to develop over the years. So I wasn't necessarily prepared for all of that, and I can only imagine what it was like for the guys.
Brandon in particular.
Yeah, Brandon, but Stewie hit 5 threes, and
which is
Darius played great.
Cool.
But the Instagram likes of tweets and whatnot, I'm sure it was hard.
Got a national reaction.
So then our next game was on Tuesday against Woodbury Forest. Tuesday there was the big threat of weather, And so we weren't able to practice on Tuesday because we needed the school sent everybody home early in case there was a severe storm and wind. Well, the coach in me is like, oh no, because now we can't practice. Woodbury is a boarding school. So
They can.
You knew they were practicing. And then we played them the next day on Wednesday and squeaked out a win. But one of the things that was really cool in that game, we got a huge lift from one of our seniors, a guy named Connor Campbell, who did not get any playing time in the John Marshall game. But I think we were emotionally drained and just not sharp, and Connor hit a big three. He took a charge, and there's no way, of course, like Brandon, he had a great game and guys made plays, but I don't think we win that game without the contribution from Connor.
Yeah.
And that's when it's really fun as a coach, when you see a guy who, is ready when his name's called and steps up and helps his team.
There are fewer things better in sports than that kid who doesn't get a whole lot of playing time.
Yep.
He comes in and has a nice little 5-minute spurt.
It was great. It was awesome. It was and he's an awesome kid that does everything you could ask to the best of his ability. And he's not 6'4", 285, but his heart is as big as anybody, and he gives you everything he's got. So I was really happy. Those are the fun moments, like when you coach. Like, you want to, the wins and everything are nice, but now I really try to think more about, like, acquiring neat moments. How do you, whether it's for an individual kid or with your team, whatever happened, we lost the game, can't do anything about it now. Like, how do we go after the next special moment that we can grab together as a team?
Yeah. It's a team sport, and there's nothing finer on earth, in my opinion, than a team sport. All right, you want to end with tell me about your family?
Sure. All right, mentioned mom and dad. My dad is a lawyer. He's in that sweet spot where he's getting close to 80, but still practicing. But maybe he can.
He's still practicing. Wow.
Still practicing, but maybe he can go in on Tuesday afternoon and check out Thursday afternoon, that phase. And my mom is a retired teacher. My sister is paralegal at McGuire Woods.
Okay.
My wife is also a lawyer, does trusts and estates. So everybody in my family, they're either teachers or lawyers or in the law profession. A lot
of history majors, maybe.
A lot of history majors, humanities. Really proud of my family, and I'm very fortunate. They're great supporters. Like, means a lot. They come to all the games, and
that's awesome.
And are there for me, and so that means a lot to look up and see. My mom, my dad, my sister. My wife will be there, and then, but she's not always there. But we've got 3 girls, little ones, 7, 5, and 2.
It's a lot of fun.
So I've learned over the years that I've got to be ready to be present after a great win or a tough loss, and go home and be ready to be dad. Greg Popovich, the Spurs coach, somebody asked him one time, what do you do after a win? And he said, I go home and have dinner and a bottle of wine with my wife. And so, well, what do you do after you lose? I go home and have dinner and a bottle of wine with my wife. I'm not always good about being, the losses sting.
Sure.
And you can have restless nights, but trying to make sure you keep it in perspective. And family is good for doing that, for sure. I'm very fortunate.
I think it's ironic that you coach a boys basketball team, a high school boys basketball team, and you go home to 4.
That's right.
Four females.
Everybody gives me a hard time. They, because Coach K's got 3 daughters.
Yes, he does.
So they're like, "Are you just trying to be like Coach K?" And I think there's certain things, especially younger, I would try to look at Coach K and be like, "I want to be just like that." But then you realize, like, you have to be you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I figure Coach K's got 3 daughters. That's a good thing. And
he's a good Coach K is a great role model, and obviously, arguably the most successful college basketball coach of all time. So he's a good role model.
And I love being at a boys' school and coaching boys, but having 3 girls is great. And The other night we were getting ready to go play collegiate, a big rival, and there was a big game at St. Catherine's. They were also playing collegiate, and it was a spirit night, and my wife was taking the girls to that, as they should. And I loved it because my daughter asked, if I was going to be going to the St. Catherine's game that night. She had no idea that we were playing collegiate and didn't care.
Right.
And it's a good reminder to that there are bigger things in the world than one particular basketball game. You want to go give it everything you got, but whether we win or lose, like, my kid's not going to care at the end of the day.
It's a great reminder that they have their own lens, and that lens matters as much as your lens.
Yep, yeah. Absolutely.
Hamill, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you having me, and it was fun talking sports with you and teaching and former teachers, and really appreciate the opportunity.
Good luck the rest of the season.
Thank you. We're gonna fight hard. I can tell you that. We got good kids, so the plan now is to make some noise down the stretch.
I love it. I wish you nothing but the best, and I think you guys are going to end the season really, really well.
Great. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd also really appreciate if you'd rate and review us. You can find us at scodupodcast.com.